I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I put on the screen share and I forgot to record. I'm so sorry. I'm going to go back, you guys. Just one screen. I think I'm going back. Can't get it back. There we go. All right, let me just do a really quick introduction. This is the February 28th 2023 general meeting with David R. Smith. I am so sorry I forgot to start the recording when we started the meeting, and that is really a shame. But anyway, I'm moving on to talk about the Waterworks Online show, which is the 2023 annual membership exhibition. And that exhibition will be on from April 28th until June 30th. And the Waterworks Online Awards reception will be held on Zoom April 28th from 5 to 7 p.m. Pacific time. We have two workshops associated with Waterworks. One of them is with Jed Dorsey, April 26th to 27th, and one of them is with David R. Smith, who was our demo artist tonight on May 1st and 2nd. So be sure and attend our awards receptions. They're always a lot of fun, and you get to see some just gorgeous art. And next, I'd like to introduce John Cogley, who is the owner and CEO of Daniel Smith Artist Materials. And John, the stage is yours. John, you're muted.
There we go.
There you go.
Well, hello, everybody from Turkey. It's very nice to be online with you today, this morning, your night. I just finished a show in Germany, Paper World, where there were, it was a pretty good show. There was tens of thousands of people coming in, just a huge amount of artists. And the one thing that I was asked over and over again was about the new gouache line, and whether it was an acrylic gouache or a watercolor gouache. And what I would go over with them is the same thing I go over with you. It's a watercolor gouache. We call it a water media versus a watercolor. It stops confusion. The gouache that we have, they're all opaque. They're very matte. The interesting thing that I was showing the artists, if we have a Cascade Green, for example, if you've used that as a watercolor, you know that it's a co-precipitated pigment, which when water is added, it breaks apart and you get yellows and greens and blues. That doesn't necessarily happen with a gouache because it is so heavily pigmented. The neat thing about the gouache, what I would tell the artists that came by is if you desire to, you can put brush strokes so it kind of looks like an oil. It kind of defies what you all practice as watercolors, going from light to dark. You don't have that same situation when it comes to a gouache. You can go dark, you can put white over black, black over white. So it's a different creative tool. We had two artists at our booth, Anders Anderson and Nicholas Lopez. Anders was using the gouache to show highlights in his paintings to draw the eye to them. We have 22 colors that we came out with. We're coming out with another 22. People would ask me, what's the magic about 22? It's the number of tubes that fit on the rack. So it just makes it very easy that way. And that's kind of all I have. If you have questions about the gouache, I'd love to answer any questions that you might have quickly.
Okay, I'm looking on the chat. I don't see anything yet. But if it comes up, I will save it for you, John.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Molly, thank you very much for having me today.
Thank you, John.
You're so welcome.
Thank you for, I mean, it's before 6 o'clock in the morning there, you guys. So John's been up a long time waiting for this early morning session, Turkey time. So anyway.
Okay, I got a couple of questions. Somebody wants to know what the binder is, and is calcium carbonate in them? Another one wants to know, can you really paint white over black?
Okay. So calcium carbonate would be put into a student grade. Ours is professional. We chose how to get opacity was just put more of our existing pigment into it.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's how we get it. And so it's the same binder, it's the same pigment. It is mixable with the watercolor, so you can go from one to the other. Can you paint over whites with blacks? Absolutely. That's one of the neat things about the gouache. It has a different behavior than just watercolor because of the thickness and the opacity of the color. And there was a third one. Now the size is 15 mil. So it's a 15 mil tube. I think that's the three that I saw.
And somebody wants to know if, I'm sorry, Marion Leggett wants to know if we can do a gouache demo sometime. That would be wonderful. The other thing is there anything, in your opinion, that we could do to help the people of Turkey with the earthquake?
Oh, I'm sure there's all types of sites. There's so many people that are involved trying to help. There's a lot of people that need help. So I'm sure that on the website you find just countless sites.
Yeah. John, I have a question. Why
Yes.
do watercolors dry lighter and gouaches dry darker?
You know, it's so the neat thing about watercolor in general for you as watercolorists is you really get to see what the pigment looks like, because the only thing that's really there is the gum arabic to hold the pigment to the paper. So you actually get to see it, whereas watercolorists oil colorists and acrylic artists, they see it through a different lens, because it's either through linseed that they're seeing it or they're seeing it through a polymer. So because you're actually seeing the pigment and the pigment load is so high in our gouache, it's always going to dry darker just because of the pigment load.
Okay. I just always wondered because I knew it had the same binder. It was just more concentrated, and then the more concentrated is why it's darker.
Yeah, you're seeing way more pigment.
Okay, got it. All right. Well, thank you, John, very much. Really,
Uh-oh.
really appreciate that.
You're so welcome.
And now we're going to introduce David, and I'm going to share my screen again. And hopefully my Acrobat will, there we go. David R. Smith, signature member of American Watercolor Society and National Watercolor Society. And I'm just going to show a few samples of his work before he begins his demo. And of course, to see more of David's art, please visit www.dssmithfineart.com. All right, David, you're on. I think you're muted. There you go.
There we go. Oh, sorry about that. I didn't want to interrupt, so I muted myself. Thanks so much for everybody for having me, and for everyone for joining me. Looking forward to sharing my my passion for watercolor with everyone. Is there any questions before we jump into this?
Just the comments of beautiful paintings.
Thank you. Yeah, that was super fun to see the presentation and the paintings and things. Well, for the demo, if it's all right, I'm going to go to the screen share, and I got some cameras above me, and I'll flip my hat around.
Oh.
I know you all want to see my. I don't want the glare of my head to hurt anybody either. So hopefully you guys see my hand wandering around.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so this is a one of I used to do a lot of demos of like Misty Lake type of scenes and things like that. And I wasn't really sure what I was going to do, but I just got back a couple days ago from Pensacola teaching a workshop down there, which it was nice to get out of the cold for a bit because I'm in Minnesota, so we've got lots of snow here as well. And folks were just itching to paint rocks underwater. And so I thought, wow, this is really a popular subject. And so that's what I thought I'd do, is do that demo. But just for fun of it, I tried to do a quick painting before I got on here. I started like an hour before the class started, and I thought maybe you might find that interesting because if you've already seen me do a demo of like rocks underwater, it doesn't have to be just organic shapes. So I'm going to show you something I did really quick, and then I'll do the demo of the that scene we see on the right. And sometimes I'll pop over to something like this. So here's the photo, and you can want to take a screenshot of that and try it on your own. Feel free to take a screenshot. What I'm going to look at on my iPad is probably this. I like to look at my photos in black and white, and then when I'm demoing, we'll have both up there. Anyways, a few years ago, I was in I did about a 9-week backpack trip through 9 countries, and I was in Budapest, and I took a bunch of photos. And this is one of the scenes, and I thought, it just like the scene we see on the right of the river and the trees. We have a beautiful reflection with a big open space here where I could place in some rocks, and we have this interesting action line of this of the buildings in the background is really fun. And so I melded a couple of photos together. I like this bridge. And I like this scene. And so, so the first thing I did was I did a couple little sketches to figure out which way I wanted to go with it. And a lot of times, just if in case you're curious, because this is a big learning experience, right? And you kind of want to see what artists go through to kind of develop their painting. A lot of times I'll do little value thumbnails in paint like this. Okay, so these are just really quick little thumbnails, but I just was sitting down with the pencil and I did a couple little sketches, and then I did a really small little painting, but you can still see you get that same kind of a river or the rocks underwater. So the rocks weren't there, but I just threw them in there. So I thought, maybe you'd find that interesting. So this was the subject. And then there was no rocks under the water, but I just threw them in there. And so I thought I'd show you how I do that, how I try to suggest give the impression of rocks being under the water. So hopefully that'll be a fun subject for everybody. Let me just throw my iPad back here. Okay. There we go. And I already did a quick little sketch, and I'll show you, I've done this demo before, so I can show you some progression shots too. I think, I'm just trying to give you a good learning opportunity. And you can see that every time I do it, it turns out a little bit differently. So this is freehand drawn, so it's a little, might not be perfect, but hopefully it'll be pretty close. I'm going to find going on my iPad here and finding my reference. Black and white. Okay, here it is. Actually, let me show you what I do in a workshop when I teach something like this. So here's the photo, and a lot of times I'll torture people with value study. So we'll do a value painting, and then here's the first stage, is just toning the paper. All right, so. And I tell folks, don't worry if it looks wrong, right? At the beginning, if it looks right, then it's wrong. I know it's a little bit backwards, but if you can see, like, for example, green tree, this tree's green, this tree's whatever, gold, this tree's red, and everything's identified, then I think it's actually incorrect. The first stage, everything's kind of blurry and out of focus. And as the painting progresses, then we start to get things into focus. And I'm going to have fun showing you how I love to spatter paint, spatter water. I use different types of tools. I'm going to show you all kinds of different tools. And then there's, example of the rocks under the water. And here's another, or here's actually the version that was the progression. And then, so each time I do it, might end up a little bit different when I'm doing the demo, but so I'm going to pull up that. And now let's have some fun.
So David, you have to tell us a little bit about why the Bob Ross.
Oh, yeah,
references
yeah.
are- Just a
Yeah, the
little
Bob
story.
Ross thing, yeah, it just got really out of control. So the shirt of the day says, ever make mistakes in life? Let's make them birds. Yeah, they're birds now. So the whole Bob Ross thing, what happened was I wore a shirt every time I painted just to lighten everybody up and have fun. I wore a shirt that said, no mistakes, just happy accidents. And then I also had a shirt that said happy trees on it. And I just thought it was funny. And I thought Bob was kind of funny and he's a sweet guy. And I didn't really know that much about him, but of course I knew he was an oil painter and he was on PBS and things. Anyways, everyone saw me wearing that shirt and eventually I started getting gifts. And I got the Bob Ross bobblehead, the Bob Ross Chia Pet, the Bob Ross Band-Aids for the not so happy accidents, the Bob Ross energy drinks, the Bob Ross cereal, that I got Bob Ross everything. And my mom loves giving me the Bob Ross shirts. So yeah, I just got out of control. And now I know everything about the guy. And yeah, if you want to know anything about Bob, I can tell you everything about him. But that's all it got started. And I just have fun with it. And he's a sweet guy, but unfortunately he painted in oils. So we won't hold that against him. All right.
Great story. Thank you.
Yeah. And I got all kinds of Bob interesting facts I could share I've learned over the years, but we'll get into the painting. Okay, so the first thing that you saw in that progression was the first thing I did was tone the paper. But I always tell participants before you start dropping your paint on there, just darken up your drawing where you think it needs to be darkened. And you're going to hear me talk a lot about values. So I'm sure everyone's familiar with values, how dark or how light something is. So if something's in a dark value area, really just get that, draw that dark because you don't want to lose your place. And in this painting, if you're going to give the painting a shot, I would suggest a lot of times when I teach this or something similar, the participants have a hard time getting that mirror reflection. So I think it'd be a good idea if you want to try and paint this, is to just go ahead and draw that reflection in. Or I'm going to draw a little bit darker so you can see it a little better. Okay. And that'll just, because if those two don't, mirror each other, if the reflection doesn't mirror what's on shore, it's going to look a little odd. And the other problem that I see happen is when people paint this, sometimes like the whole bottom's so wet and they try and paint this, the reflection area, and of course it just blurs out, and then they don't have the reflection and it doesn't mirror the top. So anyways, just keep that in mind. Okay, so I darken my drawing, and then the next step is I'm going to tone the paper. I tend to work warm to cool, light to dark. So we're going to start with kind of our lighter values, but in this painting, a lot of times I'm going to integrate my mid values and my darks into into my, I might introduce my darks into my mids. I might introduce my mids into my lights, because I like my thicker pigment sometimes to melt into the thinner pigment. And I'm interested in different kinds of edges to edges of my shapes. All right, so if there's no questions, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to start wetting down some large areas of the paper. I know there's not going to be any white up in my sky. I know when you're looking at the photo, you're probably like, well, that's a white sky, but I'm going to pull out my artistic license and say that's not actually a white sky. That's more kind of a light blue sky, maybe. And when I'm toning the paper, what I'm thinking about is what is white. I want to try and avoid anything that is white. So if you were looking at that black and white photo, what do you see on here that's white? Okay, some of you are saying the sky. Well, I'm going to make it a light blue sky. Anything else as you move down the paper from the sky down? Yeah, probably the top of some rocks, right? All right, so that's what I'm asking myself as I'm looking at that. What is white? So I'm going to say, yeah, some tops of some rocks might be white. So maybe I'll leave a little bit of white paper there. And other than that, I'm actually going to break through, because I want whatever happens up here, just kind of go down here and just blur. I want to integrate. I just want this to run right down. And so what's white? What's white? Here's the most important white is right here, right here. Okay, you see that nice white area around that reflection of that tree? All right. Right there. And I took a workshop from a gentleman named Herman Peckel. So you guys should get him in town. He's really good and super fun and a little crazy. So he's right up my alley. And what Herman Peckel said in his workshop was, he said a lot of interesting things. And one was, and sometimes some of the painting stuff, he said, try to leave a patch of white. So here's my patch of white. I'm going to try and leave a patch of white. So if I want to leave this white, what do you think I should do? Should I just paint around it and leave it white? Well, if I do that, if I just paint around it like this, right, and leave like a big square there, then anytime anything I paint is going to run down, water's going to follow water, and then I'm going to have a square there, right? So I can't do that. I would say if that's going to be your patch of white, let's just keep that really, really wet. So anything that goes in there will just flow out of there, okay? And so it might not be the white of the paper, but it'll be white enough in relation to the other values around that it'll read as white or very, very light. Okay, so I've wet most of the paper, trying to avoid some whites. And notice when I wet around these rocks that are going to keep white or light, I'm staying, a good like ½ centimeter away from them because I don't want to touch them right now. Because I can't really see what I'm doing with just clean water. So when I get some paint on my brush or paint on the paper, then I'll be able to judge that a little better. And some of you are probably wondering, and feel free to jump in with any questions, but you're probably wondering, why didn't he tape his paper down, right? That's a question I get a lot. And the reason is a lot of times I'll wet the back of the paper. And actually, a lot of times, like you saw that floral, that radiant floral, and there was a painting I did that won the top award TWSA, was a fountain painting. And that floral and the fountain painting, a lot of paintings I put a lot of time into, I will dunk the entire paper into a tub of water so that's wet front and back. All right. So I'm not going to do that in this one, but there might be a time where I might want to wet the back of the paper. And we'll talk about, well, why would you want to wet the back? And why would you dunk the whole paper painting into a tub of water? In fact, I'll even dunk, even when the painting's 99% done, I'll dunk it into a tub of water sometimes and work on it. And it's a really fun way to work. Okay, so I'm going to start tinting the paper. So I'm going to grab, it's just some cerulean blue on my dirty palette here. And I'll just start up here and do a kind of a graded wash and just let it fade out. All right, so it's going darker to lighter as it moves down. That looks good. And then maybe I'll start tinting the trees. And I like to start kind of warm. So this is some Queen Gold, and I'll just drop some of that in there. And we're just going to have all these pieces of Queen Gold back here, and maybe there's some trees back there that are going to be kind of blurry. We'll come back up here in a little bit. And well, actually, we can just do it right now. There's more than one way of kind of going through all this stuff. I was thinking about it doesn't matter. We'll tone this and we'll come back up. All right, so I'm going to tone the water, and this is a kind of a fun little graded wash. I'm going to start with it's a Core Cobalt Teal. So I'm actually an ambassador of Core Paint, golden product, and but I think any Daniel Smith or any professional brand paint is just fine. But I do like the Core paint, and this is and also I'm an ambassador or ambassador representative of Cheap Joe's, and I use a lot of American Journey too. But this so this is Cobalt Teal, and notice it got it started darker here, right? And then as I moved up, because it was wet, right? The paper's wet. As I moved up, I kind of ran out of pigment as I moved up. So it gets lighter and lighter and lighter because I want this to be my patch of white, right? Or very, very light. Okay. And now I'm going to grab that Queen Gold. I'm going to do the same thing. I'll start underneath the blue. All right. And then I'll move that up into that Cobalt Teal, and I get this beautiful greenish color, right? Mix those in. Maybe a little bit more. I just love that color. All right, and then I'll go down to the bottom here, and because if we look at this picture here, do you see how gold and red that is, right? So I'm just basically kind of using that as my inspiration, right? I'm going to use some alizarin crimson down here. It's a little dirty. That's all right. These are rocks. And I'm going to move that up into the Quinn Gold. So what do we got? We've got we've got basically just clean water. And then we've got some very light cobalt teal or cobalt turquoise, or you could even maybe use cerulean blue. And then I go down to then I use some Quinn Gold, and then I use some alizarin crimson. All right, and that's just toning the paper with that. You know what, before I forget, maybe I don't want these rocks to be bright white. Maybe I'll grab a little bit of color and I'll just go over this kind of the side of the brush, kind of a dry brush, just give it a little texture. On that guy and this guy, a little gold on them. And we'll just put a little shadow on that guy right for right now. I'm sure I'm going to be playing a lot with these guys later. All right. And we could, I don't know, we could tint this if we wanted to. There's so many steps coming up that there's no hurry. Again, I've done this in different stages in the past. We could tint this area if we wanted to, or we could wait. Maybe I'll just tint it a little bit just so you can kind of see it progressing. So here's a couple others, just so you can see how it's kind of coming together. Here's a rock right here, and see how I'm avoiding the white. So I'm negative painting, which means painting around those white rocks. There we go. And I think I'll just leave it like that. Because again, I don't want to hit this area, right? I want to keep that really white, right? So I'm being really cautious and kind of encouraging you, if you're trying this, to stay away from this area for right now. But while things are wet, we have some trees in the distance. And I know when you're looking at the photo, the trees in the distance are getting the same amount of attention as the trees, they're coming closer to us, in the midground, right? And so what I want to do is pull up my artistic license and push those trees back, make them a little blurrier, maybe a little more atmospheric. So I'm just going to grab some of that blue color and just drop, that's the cerulean blue. There might be some cobalt teal and other things in there. And drop that in while it's wet to get kind of a blurry edge. And look what I'm doing again. I'm doing that negative painting, right? And you know what, maybe we'll put some trees back here too while we got us on our brush. And maybe they don't need to be all, I'm not sure what color to put in there. We'll try some of this, a little bit of warm in there. And just gives a little bit of difference of values, right? So it's just not all the same. And you know what I like to do? Spatter. If I spatter water and a droplet hits there, I'm going to get some weirdness up in my sky. So just something to be aware of. All right, I know that's got a big sheen in it. I wonder if I turn the light off, if it'd be better. You guys let me know if it's, maybe I can put maybe that light is too harsh. I've got
I think that's fine. I think that when you turned it
Alright.
off, it was too dark.
Yeah, let me know if I got about 4 lights shining. I just have a new studio, so it's kind of figuring out what's the best. I'm gonna tint these rocks a little bit, just so it's a little highlight on those guys instead of there. And now that's going to have a reflection, right? Let's go ahead and hit it while it's, let's see. So there was something like that. We'll leave a little white. I leave a little white sliver here and there to suggest a break, right? And we won't worry about this. And then we'll get that same sky color. Hopefully it's not dry. I know the light is so intense. We'll just let that blur out. There we go. Don't worry about that. Okay, so there we go. A little bit more blue. It's a lot of brown in there. There we go. Okay, so there's some fuzzy trees off in the distance, which is going to really help this pine. I really want to make that pine really pop, right? I want that to be the dark against the light. Okay. While things are wet, just like we did here, and so we can help make those distant, make the trees look like they have some depth, like some trees off in the distance. I'm just gonna drop in some paint. This happens to be just some dirty blue. Let's see, look at the photo here. This is inspiration. Whoops, I don't want them the same height. And let's just drop in some stuff in here. And there's a tree there. So I just got back from Florida, and of course they got all those palm trees. And they're wondering why all their beaches had all these pine trees. Well, that's what you get. No, I did paint palm trees, but that was kind of funny. I'm just not used to them. We painted a little scene from Montrachet, which is a kind of a neat little area in Florida. Okay, so there we got some. I suppose I should kind of mix up the colors a little bit. Okay, so now we've got some fuzzy trees. Maybe those can be off in the distance. I know everything's kind of a mess right now, but it will hopefully start to come together. Okay, so now I didn't wet the back, so it shouldn't take me too long if I want to lock this in place. So I'm gonna dry this. The one thing I forgot to do that I should recommend to everybody who's doing this is when you do your sky right away, you should wipe the edge of your paper like this. It's now mine, it's too late, you know, it would have already created a balloon, but a lot of times greater moisture follows less moisture, and so the water will collect around the edge of your paper or under your tape, and then it dries at a slower rate, so the moisture on the surface will wick that moisture out, and as it wicks that moisture out into the paper, it pushes the pigment and creates those blossoms and blooms. So it just might be a good idea to get in the habit of wiping the edge. The only place I didn't want blossoms and blooms was in the sky, so that's why if you do this, go ahead and just wipe that edge when you do it after you put the sky in. Let me show you another tool I use. Come here. Is I use a shield, and sometimes I'll spatter. So I don't want blossoms in my sky, right? So I'll protect areas, and then I'll do this, and then I'll just create some blossoms and blooms in those trees. That water's hitting, the greater moisture is the droplet that's hitting. It's hitting the pigment and it's pushing the pigment and might create some blossoms and blooms. Okay, I'm going to dry this really quick. And then we'll move on to the big step. This is the easy step. All right. Should be dry enough. I just want to make sure you want to dry it enough that when you do the reflection down here, that it stays within the line. A lot of times I just blur, I don't paint within the lines, but this reflection, I want to stay within my drawing. All right. So after you dry, I always tell people, first step, darken your drawing. If there's something you can't see, it's going to be frustrating for you to paint, right? When you lose your drawing. So if there's something you want to see, While it's dry, you can go ahead and you redraw any, if you forgot where that pine tree is, or you can't see where where you want your trees or rocks or whatever, go ahead and redraw that. Okay, so I'm okay. I think I'll be able to figure it out. It's still a little moist, but I think I'm good. This is pretty moist down here, but we're going to start up here. Okay, so now I'm going to consider this mostly my light values. Now I'm going to do mostly mids, but I will do some lights and I will do some darks. I'm definitely going to go dark. You're going to see I'm going to put some really rich darks in, and I'm going to you're going to hear me say I'm using like coffee consistency paint or Coca-Cola consistency, whatever you want to call it, and creamy paint. And that's the terminology I heard again Herman Peckel using, which he I think got from Joseph Zbufik. And so we're going to use these different consistencies of paint, these different sometimes I'll use a very transparent paint. Now I'm going to flip this over and wet the back, because this is the big step. Actually, cheapers, I wonder if I should, because this is still damp down here. I'm concerned because it's still a little damp, and if I wet the back and it's already damp, then the paper is really going to be damp down here, and I'm going to just lose control. Maybe I'll dry this bottom area right here. This section right here is a little bit damp, and then I'll wet the back. I've done that before where I've been impatient and I've wet the back, and because greater moisture follows less moisture, I wet the back and the paper wasn't quite dry. That less moisture wicked the greater moisture from the back, and all of a sudden everything it went from, basically everything was damp, and I just didn't have any. It was hard to control. So let's make sure it's nice and dry. Okay,
Okay, we got a couple of questions here, David. One
sure.
of them wants to know what weight paper and what type of watercolor paper you're using.
Good question. This happens to be, I use a variety of weights and a variety of brands of paper. This is Arches paper. And so I probably use 90% of the time Fabriano Artistico, but this is Arches. So why would I use Arches if I'm so used to using Fabriano Artistico? So the reason why is because Arches is kind of a workhorse of paper. It's more forgiving of a paper, which means when I put a glaze of color on and then I dry it and I put another glaze of color on, there's less chance of disturbing the previous glaze of color. It doesn't lift as easy. Fabriano Artistico lifts, it's very sensitive, it lifts very easily. And so like when I do the rocks and stuff underwater, I've done it, like I showed you some paintings earlier, some of those were on Fabriano. So it's not that you can't do it, it's just that it can be a little bit trickier. And so it's just, this is a little bit easier to work on. So why do I like Fabriano Artistico is it gives me great texture and it's super fun. And it lifts really easy. So there's artists, for example, Chen Qi up in Duluth, Minnesota, who does those beautiful koi fish and florals and other things, where he fills the canvas with color and he takes a thirsty brush and he lifts out paint. And he's using Fabriano Artistico for that. He has like 4 different approaches to painting. And that's one of his approaches. And so depending on the subject and the technique I'm going to use, just like if I'm going to, I want to make a certain mark, I'm going to use a certain brush. I think about, what kind of paper will help me to achieve the result I'm after. When I paint outdoors, plein air painting, I use 300 pound, and 99% of the time I'm using Fabriano Artistico 300 pound paper, because it doesn't do this. This is 140 pound Arches cold press. And when I paint outdoors, it's 300 pound Fabriano Artistico rough, because I just really in the one go, a little more spontaneous. I like getting a dry brush. It's easier on a bumpier surface like the rough paper, right? Okay, what was the other question?
That was it. It was about the weight of the paper and what type of paper. A couple of
Oh.
other questions were, who did you learn your style from? And what color do you use for shadows? What's a good color to use for shadows?
Good question. Okay, so when I first started painting in watercolor, well, I actually, when I first started painting, I was studying Chinese brush painting. So I was doing like sumi-e, like ink on rice paper. And I did that for quite a bit. And I actually took some lessons in Beijing, China. I went with a teacher over there, and then they went on to Mongolia, and I stayed in Beijing, took a few lessons there. And it was a really wonderful experience. And the nice thing about studying Chinese brush painting, ink on rice paper, for my transition into watercolor is it helped me with two things. One, it really helped me to be brave, to go for it, because on rice paper, you can't correct anything, right? It's like working on tissue paper. If you try to
Right.
scrub something out or anything, it just tears, right? So you just have to go for it. It's like one stroke painting. You just have to go for it. It doesn't work, you throw it away and then try another one. The other thing is a lot of watercolorists, it's got a kind of a bum wrap. Watercolor is a kind of a weak medium, like a very washed out medium.
Maybe.
And,
Yeah.
part of that is because we haven't, a lot of us won't use the full range of values. We never get up to this, right? And that to make it really pop. And the nice thing of working with Chinese brush painting or sumi-e is you're using ink, and you can't get darker than ink, right? And so it kind of got me over the fear of, well, I never had a fear of going dark. In fact, that was a funny thing that Herman Peckel said in the workshop. He's critiquing paintings, and he said, David, you never have to worry about going too dark. Apparently, I turned to the dark side. So yeah. So anyways, I studied Chinese brush painting, and then for quite a while. And then I was introduced to watercolor really by a guy named Gordon McKenzie. So look him up. He's really good. And I got books and DVDs and all kinds of stuff. He's a Canadian artist, Gordon McKenzie, and he does a lot of these misty lakes and all kinds of things like that. And I took a week-long workshop with him up in Dillman's, and I was like, wow, watercolor is so forgiving. I know it's all relative, right? Compared to like working on rice paper. So he was my introduction, but then I studied Roland Roycraft, Nita Engel, Chen Qi, just, everybody I could get, books and DVDs and yeah, so I just was looking at everybody, and then I started taking some workshops, and yeah, that's kind of how I got started. But I would definitely check out if you're kind of new to watercolor, or even if you're not, if you're interested, just do a Google search or do some YouTube searches for Gordon McKenzie. Really nice. He's a teacher too. So sometimes you get an artist who's a really good artist, but they don't know how to break things down and teach it. Well, he was like a head of like a whole province or something, like teaching teachers and helping the art system and stuff. So he's a good teacher and he's a good artist. He's a real nice guy. So yeah, check him out. Okay.
Okay, and then wait a minute. There's, Lori wants to know the explanation. Oops, sorry. Understanding why you're wetting the back of the paper while working on the other side. Does it?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I didn't explain that. Yes. So in the workshop, I will, again, thanks to Herman Peckel and Joseph Buchvik, talking about different moisture qualities of paper. And they talk about dry, damp, moist, and wet. I kind of just call it how I see it. So dry paper, or is it shiny wet, or is it dull wet, or is it dripping wet? Just so, it's easier. Sometimes people get mixed up with damp and moist, things like that. But anyways, to keep the paper damp or moist, or in order to manipulate the colors longer and play with the colors longer, I can wet the back, and that'll give me more time to play with the colors and move colors around if I want. Yeah. And sometimes I'll use a bead of color, like I'll work a color down and I'll move it. You'll see it down here when I do the reflection. It'll be a bead of color, and I'm going to move the board around, and it's going to be almost like pouring. All right, down here. And but a lot of times when I'm doing a bead, I have to carve around things. Let's see if I can find a painting. Let's see if there's any paintings sitting here. Well, here's a value study of it, the same thing. Well, here's a painting I just did on a Zoom workshop. Now, when I was carving around rooftops and stuff, I couldn't pre-wet everything, right? I couldn't pre-wet. By the time I pre-wet everything like I did on the river, the top would be dry, right? And so I just need to take paint and move the paint down, move a puddle of paint down, move a bead of paint down, and carve things out as the paint moves down the paper. And if the paper back is wet, I can kind of keep that bead alive a little bit longer. And, I'll have multiple beads. I'll have a bead going over here. I'll have a bead of paint going over here. And I can kind of move those beads down the paper. And wetting the back will just allow me more time to play with that. Oh, and somebody asked about colors for shadows. Again, I really a big, strong advocate of values. Whatever color, any color is fine that you want your shadow color to be, but you got to get the value to work with, your reference, right? So yeah, it's really whatever color you want. I as far as my dark, as I get darker, you're going to see me use a lot of indigo and phthalo blue, sometimes neutral tint, things like that. But as far as shadow color, sometimes I have a lighter shadow, and it could be a gold or it could be any color, but you got to get the value. The value's got to be right. Okay, so let's have some fun here. And so what I'm going to do to have some fun is I'm going to spatter some water, and I spatter using a variety of technique tools. I use a spray bottle, and when I use a spray bottle, I have one that I can adjust the nozzle on, and I'll just tickle the trigger. When I tickle the trigger, little droplets of water will come out. And if that's not working, I'll just use a brush, and I'll just spatter with my brush like that. And then there's another technique I can show you during the workshop as well, but I had to get a camera on me to do that. So let me just use this. I'm going to get some water up in the nozzle, and I'm going to protect this tree here because I want that tree to be nice and hard edged, and I want it really to pop. So I'm going to cover that tree up, and I want to spatter these other trees with some water. And I'm just going to go crazy. It's like Forrest Gump says, watercolor is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get, right? You just got to go for it and see what happens. Okay, so I spatter a bunch of water, and then we just pray that it just works out. Okay, I'm going to grab a bunch of color. So I spattered water. Now I've got a bunch of color on this brush. It's going to be dripping off. Look, it's dripping off that brush, right? And now when I pull that up into that spattered water, let's see what happens. It already starts to create some limbs where it hits those droplets of water. And the more droplets I put on there, the more this is going to just do its own things. So, and then if I want to help it along, I can just make little smiley faces. When it hits those droplets, it'll just flare out, and it'll give you some really organic edges to your trees and things. Now, one thing we can do if we want to, this tree, if we wanted, we can try and negative paint around that guy. So I could try and make some like limbs over here. And then again, but I've already spattered tons of water, so it's going to leak in. So that's why we just got to remember what Forrest Gump said about watercolor, and you just never know what you're going to get. Okay, so there we go. And notice I said I was going to be working corn mids, but this is actually, kind of that coffee consistency paint, right? It's very, very fluid, very wet, but I'm going to be dropping in. What do you put into your coffee? I'm going to put in cream, right? I'm going to drop a creamy or darker pigment into that in a little bit. Now there's a big tree. Actually, it's this one right here. Now notice I just went straight up, and already it started blurring out, right? Because it hits those droplets of water and gives me those interesting edges. And now there's another tool that you can use that I use as well. And this is something I learned from that Gordon McKenzie. He uses a sponge. I'll show you the sponge in this guy. And it's something I incorporate once in a while. Again, it just it's fun and gives you some interesting marks. I use a porous sponge. I'm just filling this in a bunch of Quinn Gold, trying to leave a few little spots or highlight stuff. There's going to be a trunk right here. I'll just drop it. And again, I know it's going to be darker later, but I'm kind of creeping up on everything. And I'm not really sure what I'm doing. I'm just going to go for it. Like, well, he doesn't know what he's doing. Yeah, sometimes I just play and I just try and make something out of the chaos. All right, we're going to try and
David, are you working at an angle?
Yeah, good. Gosh, good observation. I hardly ever work flat. I rarely work flat. There are times I do, but it rarely works flat. This board is tilted. You can see how it's got here's Mr. Bead. You got a bead here, you got a bead here. And so
Yeah.
the board is tilted. This like 10 degrees, but it's at a diagonal. So this is straight down. And now this is a diagonal. And so and you're gonna see when I'm spattering water, the water will start cutting through stuff at that diagonal, just giving a kind of interesting how about maybe suggest like a rock or something there, like I did over there. So we'll see what happens. Okay. And if everybody wasn't watching, I'd probably be done with this by now, but I just like, uh-oh, everyone's watching. I gotta try and make something out of this. Let's try not to make too many mistakes. Right? It's like you always tense up. All right, let's see. We'll just see what happens. We can always just destroy that tree.
Not to make things worse, David, there are 172 people watching you.
Wow. Good. I hope they're all painting along with me. They better be doing their work. Okay, so now watch what happens here. I'm going to take some other colors. Let's see, what should I grab? Here's some phthalo blue. I'm really jumping right into some darks here just for the fun of it. And I'm just going to drop it in there like that and watch the colors blend on the paper. Right? Isn't that fun? Just watch them. Just watch them. I thought there was a tree there. No, now there is. Watch the colors blend on the paper.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I just love watching I love watching paint dry, I guess. I just love watercolor is so fun. I think I'm safe because it's a Zoom. Because when I do a lot of times when I teach or I do a demo, I'll say, I love watercolor. It's so fun. If I didn't want to have fun, if I wanted to work hard and not have any fun, then I'd paint in oils or acrylics. And then that's when I usually get just bombarded with tomatoes and just no, I'm sure I would enjoy acrylics and oils. But how much, oh my gosh, look at how much fun this is. I mean, how can you beat this? I'm going to just create a path for this just to go off the paper like down there. Just let it run down. Okay. Let's see.
What kind of brushes are you using, David?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. So I have two of these brushes. I like them so much. So I've got a new one. It's an Escoda Perla number 12. And I've got an old one. And so I've got the old one, I put a piece of tape on so I don't forget. And I just use it to blend and scrub the paper. And then the nice one. And the reason I like it, it's got a super sharp point. It just snaps right back to a nice sharp point. And I've noticed, a lot of my favorite artists were using that, like the Joseph Spufik and other artists. I'm also a big animal lover, so they're synthetic, so the animals aren't hurt. But it's really because the point is so snappy. I mean, you don't need to get. Let me just zoom in on this. I mean, I'm not an ambassador of Escoda, and I'm just wanting people to be successful. But look at the point on that. It's sharper than you can get on like a number 2 brush. It's just super sharp, super sharp, and it just snaps right back to that, right? And so all the brushes I use, happens to be a Prado. I look for nice points to the brush, and some are snappier, some are stiffer, and some are softer. Okay, so I got some soft ones. I even got some really soft ones. So this is an Ultimo. Oops, this is an Ultimo. I haven't used it, so it's not. It's a little bit wet. So this is really soft, and there's no snapback, right? It doesn't snap back, right?
Yeah.
So they're all synthetic, but some are snappier, really snappy, and some are not, a little less snappy, and some are really soft. All right, so I've got a variety of a stiffness to the brush, and but they all have a nice. I can get them all to a nice point. So I always look for a nice point, and on the flats I want a nice edge. And this happens to be just a Joe Miller 1.5 inch flat. I can't remember what it's called. It's broke off the name of it. But anyways, this is the brush that I use 99% of the time, is this brush here. It's just really snappy. And I'm sure there's other brushes that are just as good. That's the one I'm familiar with. So I'm just going to take that guy right off the paper there. Okay. Okay, we gotta keep this party going while things are still wet here. Okay, what's going on? Well, you know what? Let's get crazy here, as Bob said. And let's get some darks. We'll let those darks melt. So I'm grabbing some nice strong indigo. And let's see what happens.
Do you ever use Sumi brushes anymore?
No, I have a bunch. I haven't been using them, no. But there's a lot of watercolors to do, and I'm sure they're great. Yes. So I'm letting this indigo melt in to whatever I've done. So it gives it a little variety of values, right? And you know what? Let's start to identify where this, maybe we can try to still make this into a tree here. And a lot of talking. Let's do a little bit more painting here. Give a couple. We'll just see if we can make something out of this. I feel like this needs to go in a bit.
People have asked about the actual, the name of the brush is Skoda.
Yeah, it's the brand is a Skoda. The name of the brush is Perla, Perla.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, just like yeah. So there's like Winsor Newton, there's other brands. This brand is a Skoda. And I will pick on them a little bit. I was using another brush and the ferrule is loose on it. So I noticed that in a couple of their brushes, but I am happy with the brush. And so I'm just giving you my full review.
Super glue helps.
Yeah. Do you see what's happening up here? Isn't this fun? Like right here.
Oh, beautiful.
How did that happen? I didn't do that, right? It was just the miracle and happy accident of watercolor. So I had the board, I created an environment where that happened. I created an environment with the tilt of the board and then spattered water that ran through there and created that effect. Maybe it's light or maybe it's mist, we don't know. So that's what I like to do, is let the medium kind of do its work and do its magic, and those little happy accidents. So zoom out, there we go. Little happy accidents like that are just super fun. Let's see. Let's get some more darks in here. And you know what? Let's spatter some more water because it's not crazy enough. Whoa. I'll ruin it, but that's all right.
Good lesson.
It's just a piece of paper, right? We just do another one. If we ruin it, we go, oh, okay, well, I guess we get to do another one. Okay, you know what? Let me show you another tool. So the other tool I want to show you is the one that Gordon McKenzie uses, this right here. So he took just a cellulose sponge and he cut off a triangle, and then he cut that triangle off of the cellulose sponge, and then he got it wet and he picked at it and created a nice little point to it. Now, if you try it, it's not working for you. I sell these at $89.95. You just all right. Or you could probably pick these up for $4 at the grocery store. All right. So that's what this is. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to basically kind of stamp down the paper with that. Let me just first I'll draw a little trunk. So I'm going to take some, first put my fingerprint right there. We'll make that into a bird later. All right. Just like the shirt says, we're going to take some coffee consistency paint and we're going to just draw the trunk. So there's our trunk right down there. And then while that's wet, right away, let's get our sponge wet. Let's pick up some of this color. This has to be indigo and phthalo blue. And then up on top, if we look at the photo, the limbs are kind of pointing up, right? Like this, like that, boom, boom, boom. And as we move down, they're kind of more down like this, right? And it just gives you some interesting organic edges, organic shapes to your edges, right? So I can get some organic edges with the spattered water, or I can use the sponge, just all kinds of different fun things you can do. Maybe we should just put another, every tree, Bob says, got to have a friend. Got to maybe put a tree right here. there, something like that. Maybe make this darker around this guy. I don't want to, okay, well, let's see. See what that looks like. It looks like it's a halo around it. We don't want that. That's not good. Let's make a tree. It comes out like this. And but that's the same height as this one. We don't want that. All kinds of things to look out for, right? When you're painting. It's like, okay. It's like making a pleasing painting is, this artwork is tricky. So I'm trying to negative paint around this guy who's falling down.
Mm. So Susan is wondering about the drip on the right.
Oh, that's no problem. We don't worry about that. Yeah, that'll be fine. We'll make this, break this up. So it's like, these are two equal distances apart. We got to break it up with another guy, maybe right here. Pretty soon I'm going to lose all my, all right. We spatter some more water. This doesn't look good. I'm gonna have to lose that tree. Another thing you can use is a tissue. So if you just got too out of control, you can just tissue stuff too. And we can go back into this with some darks later. More additional darks, but I don't like how this is all like the same width, right? So we'll see what happens. I might destroy him later. A lot of times I don't do any negative painting. I didn't in Pensacola when I did this. I didn't do it. But I thought I'd give it a shot because we can always remove a tree if we want. And another thing I like to do is spatter paint. So we've done a lot of spattering the water. Maybe I'll spatter a little bit more water.
It's still pretty wet.
Yeah, and I keep spattering the water, so it's just like getting really, really wet. And let's drop in some more paint here. Give some variety of values, get things to run, and then we'll get some nice dark darks. I forgot I wanted to put some nice dark darks in here right away, and I forgot. Now it's already drying because I didn't do any spattering over here, right? There, it's still melting in. I think I caught it. I didn't want to be looking too flat, like all the same value. There's a little bit of variety in there. And the water's carving through, creating some interesting effects there. And what we can do too is we can spatter some paints. This is cobalt teal.
Mm.
And we just pray that it's all right. We mix little mosquitoes. You can't go up to the boundary waters unless without getting into mosquitoes. Okay.
True.
All right, we can come back up here. We can play with it more, but we should identify this. Maybe I'll make that dark against the light because this is real light. Well, let's see. Yeah. Well, we know there's going to be some dark shadows coming down like that. Maybe I'll use that to suggest some rocks. We're going to come down here in a minute, so let's just go ahead and do that. Let's see, what do I want to do with this? Just try that, see what happens. All right. All right, moving on down. Should have left a little light there. Too late. All right, now we're going to do that big bead. This is the big step right here. First, I need to create a pathway.
Right.
So I'll take this color here and all I'm trying to do is just get this wet. And create a pathway for the paint to flow. Because I'm going to basically pour and drop in a bunch of colors here in a minute. And it'll be super fun.
Someone had a question earlier about the white on the rock at the very foreground. It looks like it's not there.
The white on these rocks and more towards
The one on the lower left-hand side of the photo.
Oh, there's a little white highlight on that rock in the very bottom in the photo.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a trap. Yeah, you pull out your artistic license, you don't fall
Okay.
prey to the trap. Yeah, you might get away with it, but it might look kind of odd. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
It might be a little bit of a trap. Sometimes you don't put everything in that's in the photo. Sometimes you go, I don't think I'm gonna put that in there.
People are loving those trees.
Oh, good. Well, maybe I lucked out this time. It's always a gamble. Just play and just have fun. You know, I think the process of painting is as important as the product, that you enjoy what you're doing, having a good time. Those, you know, I do get stressed out, and that's why I don't have any hair. It does get stressful sometimes, but most of the time I'm having a good time.
I noticed you've made really big puddles of paint.
Yeah, I'm gonna actually, you know what we should do here is look at how I'm gonna just take a big brush here, and let's just drop in a bunch of water. Let's just get this really wet. Look at how wet this is. Just get it wet. All right. I want things to blend on the paper. And that's the one comment I get more than any other comment is at a workshop is, boy, David, you really work wet. Yeah, I just work with puddles a lot of times. I'm just moving puddles up. Now, eventually, you watch what's going to happen. It's going to break through, right? Ooh, boy, I almost did it. And if it did it, it's fine. No worries. Watercolor is so forgiving. If it breaks through, which it probably will, I don't worry about it. We can fix everything. Okay, now I think I will run a little bit of that off. Let me just run that over here. And let's flip it upside down for a second. Whoops, there we go. See, it ran right through there. No problem. And let's now it's running up here, right? It's linking this to this, which is great. Let's paint this guy same way that we did it up on the shore. We'll just use the sponge again. It'll be a nice reflection. So whoop, be a little bit bigger. It's all right, it's a reflection. And let's just do this. There we go.
Ooh-wee.
Watercolors for the brave, they said. What could happen? Just cleaning my sponge. I'm done with that. All right, so I'm just making sure everything's wet. I think it's pretty wet. Just emphasizing it's nice and wet so the colors will blend together. I'm trying to keep this wet. I want everything. Don't put your fingerprint there. I'm really good at putting my thumbprints on over everything. It's my signature.
Wow.
Okay, so now you clean your hands. First step before you put more thumbprints over anything. There we go. Now this is going to break through probably like it did there. And then you just hit it with a tissue if that happens. But while things are wet, let's see. Let's let some colors play on the paper here. I'm going to move that puddle out before it does break through. Try and be a little smarter. Whoops. I'm trying to get some of those colors that I see up there into here. Yeah, now
Mm.
do some, let's see, get some phthalo blue. It's a reflection, so it probably looks more like that. Let's tilt it around a little bit. I'm gonna grab some phthalo blue. Let's see, where should I put it? Drop it in here. Letting colors mix on the paper. This is already drying. Boy, you gotta move fast. Good thing I wet the back of the paper.
Um,
I'm gonna drop more water in. I want it to be like I'm pouring this. I do some of those paintings that you saw, I did not really, I didn't really pour, but I ran the color around like I'm doing now. I did some masking and then I ran color around. Let's see. See, this is already dry. It's not even linking. Because it's on the edge of the paper here and it's buckled like that, so it dried pretty quick. But we're going to break all this up with the rocks, right, that are going to be under the water. Okay. Now, let's see. I want to make sure that this is actually mirroring this. I think I got the big tree there, big tree there. I think it looks all right.
David, I thought I would just give you a time check. It's about 8:30.
How much time do I have left?
Well, since we have people on the East Coast, we're starting to lose people, but I would say a good another 15, 20 minutes. We can go till 9 o'clock if you want, our time.
Okay, so about 15 minutes. Okay, we might not get to the I'll try and just after this, I'll do the rocks under the water.
I mean, I'll stay with you. I mean, if people leave, they leave, but I just wanted to give you an idea that we lose people on the East Coast when we get.
Oh,
to
sure,
this
sure.
time.
Yeah, I know it's getting late. I know, I mean, yeah, it's here it's 10:30 here Central Time.
Yeah.
Okay, so I put some really strong phthalo blue down here. Now this is gonna break, so I'm gonna tilt that. And now, so I'm getting darker and darker and darker. I started really wet. It's still wet. But it was, I started with that Queen Gold, right? And now it's like, I'm just getting really strong, getting some strong indigo.
We've got lots of people, David, saying, we'll stay, we'll stay. It's too fascinating to leave.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're enjoying this. I love this subject. This is strong indigo. Creamy indigo. So cream, think about not too much. It's mostly, mostly pigment, not as much water. Let's straighten that out. I'm gonna chop that guy down a little bit. Okay. Whoops, I'm getting out of the picture, aren't I? There we go. Okay, this is out of control. Dropping in some water again. You're like, really? Why more water? Well, I want that indigo to kind of slowly integrate.
Oh.
I'll just hit this with a tissue. And let's try and take some of that cobalt teal.
Ooh.
Just for the fun of it. A little variety in there. Okay. And just because it's so dark right there, right? We should have a little bit of that dark up here as well, right? Just try and throw in some darks up here. I'm going to try and whip through this here so everybody can see the rocks under the water. And we want to integrate that a little bit. We don't. So I'm using that second brush to kind of tie it in a little bit. I just didn't want it to be super dark here and no darks up there. All right, and we can play with more of those rocks, trees later if we want. But I mean, there's some really fun things again going on in those trees that just happened all by itself with the water kind of carving through there.
So Betty wants to know, when you add more water, why doesn't it create cauliflowers?
Well, the cauliflowers is when there's this. I didn't drop this in while it was wet, so now it's not tying in. It's not. I almost want to go back through with a sponge and play with it, but anyways, we'll ignore it. So the cauliflower is when the greater moisture is going, the greater moisture is searching out the less moisture is wicking the greater moisture, and as the greater moisture is moving out, it's pushing the pigment. Well, this is also wet. There's not, so the greater moisture is just integrating with, the other moisture around it. There's nothing's getting pushed.
Right, yeah,
It's a puddle, right? It's just a big puddle. So that's why, yeah.
Okay, Darlene wants to know if you use black or just the darkest color of your darks for your contrast.
This is indigo. It's mostly indigo. On my palette, I've got, so here's the palette. I've got, this is indigo, and this is neutral tint. There's probably some Payne's gray somewhere in there as well. I was using indigo and phthalo blue. This is indigo phthalo blue, using a lot of cobalt teal. And this is Quinn Gold over here, alizarin crimson. I think that's pretty much all I've been using.
Okay, let's see the rocks under the water is what Mary says.
Let's see those rocks. All right, so what I need to do is I need to dry it, right? Because so there, I just wanted to tie that in a little bit. Okay, so let me get my hair dryer. People always look at me really strange when I go to the store and picking up hair dryers. I don't know why. Did the Zoom mute the microphone? Or did the Zoom mute the
Hair dryer, yes, it did.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That
pretty
shape
cool.
is weird. This is a Fritz scrubber, so I'm not opposed to like scrubbing things out, but this whole thing, I feel like I need to work on these trees, but I won't play with that right now, but change the shape a little bit with some darks and stuff. Okay, let's talk about the rocks. Woo, still, so it's still very wet. But it's all right. It'll be fine. Okay, so for the rocks, what we're gonna do is we're gonna follow the colors that are on that, the initial wash of colors. So in this area, what color is there? It's just clean water. So I'm gonna use clean water. When I get down here, it's what? Blue. So I'll use some blues. And I get into golds, I'll use golds, and so forth. All right. And just like everything, as it moves off in the distance, it's going towards that vanishing point off in the distance. So things are getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, right? There might be some really big rocks in the distance, and there might be some pebbles in the foreground, but in general, things are converging at the vanishing point. So think about the rocks getting smaller and smaller off in the distance, okay? So I'm gonna start with some clean water. So you're not gonna see anything, right? Because it's just clean, as clean as I got on my, and I'm just using some clean water, and I'm doing some horizontal strokes back and forth. Now it's gonna activate, especially since it's not bone dry, it'll start activating the paint that I've already put down as I go across here, which is fine, because it's gonna pull some of that color, which it'll start tinting these strokes, which is what I want anyway, so it's fine. So just like that, I'm already getting some color coming across. It might be hard for you to see, but you'll see in a minute. Now, as I move down the paper, instead of doing just straight across, I'm going to start doing circles and just like ovals and things like that, because now we're starting to see the rocks are getting bigger. So off in the distance, they're just like slivers. They're just very small, way off in the distance, barely seeing anything. You're going to see these come together in just a second. I'm going to drop in some pigment. Let me just get some, I'm creating a pathway for these rocks, just like, so the one that I did right before class, I got slivers up here, and as it got towards the foreground, it got bigger and bigger, right? All right, so now I'm going to drop in some color. So what color should we get? Cobalt teal, right? We'll drop that in the blue area. And now we're going to take that color and we're going to let it run. Let it run. Let it run up, run. I do a lot of Mr. Beads running around, color running around. All right. So now we're starting to see this very faint, because I got the board tilted at like a 15-degree angle. It wants to come this direction, right? Because of the gravity. And now let's grab some other colors. Let's grab the clean gold. And let's let that run.
It's like magic.
Now,
Wow.
the rocks, the problem is right now, this is actually taking a few stages, so we might not get to everything. That's a plug for my workshop, you know. But we got to, the problem is they all look like Frisbees, right? They're all just look flat. Well, we can't have that. They got to look round, right? And I didn't draw, I drew 3 rocks. I drew this one, or 4 rocks. I drew 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are the only 4 I drew. So a lot of these I'm just making up on the fly. I'm just like, okay, well, there's maybe a rock right there. So how are we going to make these rocks look round? And the trick is also, we got to keep this wet. We want this, I keep dropping in water, dropping in water, dropping in water, dropping in water, dropping in water. And you're gonna see rocks under the water in the reflective area too, right? Not just in the area where there's no reflection. So we gotta keep this going, this party going all the way across the paper. see. Whoops, don't do that. So now this rock is starting to look a little bit more three-dimensional compared to the other rocks, right? Because it has a shadow side to it. It has a form shadow to it. So there's form shadows and there's cast shadows. And this one has already got, let me just drop in a little paint so you can see it a little better. So we can see this one is got a shadow side to it. It's a big one right here. And all these rocks, a lot of these rocks, especially the ones in the foreground, we should just start to see this kind of a thing to make them look round, like a light side and a dark side. I got that on there. This one. That's fun. Gosh, hope everybody else.
Yeah. Great fun. Beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I just have such a great time with these paintings. Let's see. So we can still think mama bear, papa bear, baby bear, right? So some real small, some just huge rocks, some medium size. But in general, as things move off in the distance, we want these things to get getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay, I think we made it all the way down. Now I'm going to drop in some more water. Just make sure things are going to be integrating. And we can drop in some more pigment. I think things are pretty wet. Okay, so now I need to start making some of these rocks look round. Now, if things are a little wonky, like the rocks look kind of weird, it's actually okay, right? Because it's under the water. So the water is distorting the shape of these, right? So don't get too concerned if things don't look perfect. In fact, at the end, when I did these rocks here, is I just took a wet brush and went like this, and I kind of softened things and also help push them under the water a little bit, right? Okay, so
Catherine wants to know what's the name of your palette.
oh, my palette is an N Planar Pro palette, and you're probably like, well, I've got an N Planar Pro, it doesn't look like that. Well, what happened was somebody took a caulking gun and cocked a little. Oh, I'm sorry, this is not an N Planar Pro. This is my John Pike palette. I usually have my N Planar Pro palette here, which I use for outdoor painting. This is the John Pike palette, and this is caulking fluid. And my Plein Air Pro, my N Planar Pro, I've got like caulking. I have like little squares. I've got squares all over the place.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I just use caulking fluid to make little wells, little mixing areas within the mixing areas. But yeah, that's a John Pike palette. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm taking my old beat up brush and I'm tickling the bottom edges of some of these rocks in the foreground. So they have a soft edge to them. I'm trying to make these look round. Now you're like, well, you just lost the rock though. I'll have to re-identify it, right? So this is just the first step of a few steps to this process. So to do the rocks the way I do them, it takes there's like 3 or 4 steps. So this is the first step, just kind of figuring out where they are, and then wetting at least the ones that are close to the foreground. wetting those bottom edges. And then even while it's wet, I'll take some indigo or maybe some phthalo blue. Maybe I'll just grab some alizarin crimson, kind of warm it up a little bit. And I'll start darkening up the bottom like that. And you can even create additional rocks. And then it's nice because it gives a nice blurry edge, right? So I don't need much moisture on my brush because there's plenty of moisture on the paper. But I might start to create additional rocks. Like here's another rock I just created, right? And then I'll take my other brush and I'll fade that out or integrate that in some areas. As the paper gets to dry, it's a little bit easier. Let me just, let's see. So let me give it dark here. And then I'll create another rock. I'll make a nice dark shadow in this corner here. And now I've made another rock. So there's another rock right there now. I created a new rock. And now I've got to take this dark and integrate it in. All right. Pull that out into what I've already done. All right. So, and I'll create a rock right here. Okay, I create the bottom of that rock, and then I'll make another rock. Just make a corner. All right, don't have to outline the whole rock, but just give a corner. So now there's this rock, and I tie that in, and then there's another corner of a rock right there. All right. But maybe I want to have this right here, a little dark edge right there. All right. Right there, and then there's another rock right here. There's another rock right there. There's a rock there. Here a rock, there a rock, everywhere. Just they're everywhere. So there's rocks within rocks. There's just layers of rocks. So now as it's starting to see more like additional rocks, and some rocks are a little deeper, and I know I'm kind of flying through this, but hopefully it's starting to. You can also create texture in these guys too by spattering water, spattering paint on them, create little blossoms and blooms. So I'm creating a rock right here, just very light suggestion of a rock, right? There's the bottom of that rock, and then we'll create another rock right there. Now we need to tie this in. And so, yeah, so in the workshop, I can't remember what I'm teaching. I think I'm doing the Misty Lake kind of thing. And then I can't remember what the other subject was. But I teach Zoom workshops all year. So just go to my website, and I travel. Of course, I just got back from Pensacola, and I travel around and teach too. So if you're interested, check that out. All right, we're starting to see additional rocks within the rocks. And they're starting to hopefully it's starting to look a little bit rounder. Is anybody still out there with me?
Oh, man, there's like 155 people out there with you.
All right, great. Okay, I'll keep going then. Yeah, after the COVID, I started doing a lot of Zoom workshops. But I love teaching in person too. So I'm just still continuing to darken up underneath these rocks too. They also need to be looking around. So it gets a little bit confusing after a while. You're like, okay, just a second. What is going on with this rock? Okay. And there's just no end to additional rocks you can put in, like rocks between other rocks. Like right here, I could put another rock. Here's another rock, you can just keep going. And now I just popped in another rock there, right? And then you just fade that out. So you can just keep adding more and more rocks, as much as you want to go, you can just go wild on the rocks. But now, do the rocks look like they're under the water? Maybe some of them may, but a lot of them like might look like they're kind of, it's hard to tell, like it's above water, underwater, kind of hard to tell, right? So what I'll do is I'm going to dry it again, because I'm going to glaze over this just by wetting it, and then we'll push them under, and then I think we'll be good. I wonder if I can just maybe, this is so bad right here. Just spatter a little bit of paint there. See what happens. Break that up a little bit. Make it look a little more organic. That looks better. Okay, let's just dry it.
So Lori says that loves the rock technique. Looks like you could just reach through the cold water and touch those rocks.
Awesome, awesome, great. Okay, I'm gonna mute. Well, I don't have to mute it. All right. Trying to play with the light a little bit. Getting washed out with that bright light on there. Okay, so now I'm gonna just still a little damp. We'll see if we can get away with it. We're gonna wet. I'm just gonna take a clean brush, wet, and I'm going to run across this, and hopefully it's dry enough where I'm not going to lose everything. So again, this is why I'm working on arches. If I were not to dry this completely and it was, see, it's already running out, which is fine because I want to kind of soften this. But on Fabriano, which I love, but it would really affect the paint that I've got on there would just start to lift. And this is already lifting too, because I didn't dry it. I didn't lock it in place enough, but it's staying better than it would on Fabriano. And you should dry it when you do it at home, dry it completely, get it really locked in there and dry it. So now I'm tilting out the excess. And if there is any edges and things that bother you, you could go over it with and just kind of soften it like that. And already that's kind of help pushing it under the water, just kind of reactivating that paint, softening it, and then activating the paint, and it's kind of glazing over it on its own. And already that's helped kind of push it under. But what I'm going to do is just take this brush here, and I'll take some of that indigo phthalo blue mix down here, and let's just bravery test. Just put some horizontal lines across this. Like that.
Wow.
And now I'm going to use some cobalt teal. Fade that out, smooths up. All right, so hopefully just putting a few lines across there will help give the kind of like a little shadow or of like some water coming across, and help push the rocks underneath a little bit better.
Amazing.
Oh, good. Everyone's so quiet. I was like, uh-oh, I must have done something wrong.
Well, it's a webinar, so they can't talk, but they're writing, wonderful things in the chat.
Okay, good. Okay, one more step and then it's done. I'm gonna dry it a little bit.
I'm still trying to find the Abraham Lincoln in the yellow. The yellow rock shadows.
All right. Last thing here. And it also, another thing you can do at the end is, which would help is, I just moved into this new house, so I don't have everything out. But when you're done, putting a white mat on it would really help, but I don't think I have any around. But what I want to do is take this oil painting brush. This happens to be a number 2 Artisan Short Flat Bright by Winsor Newton, just an oil painting brush. And I'm gonna just take some paint off with that. So the same thing I did with the paint, I'm gonna do some horizontal lines. And what I'm trying to do is overlap a rock. So here's a rock right here. I want to go over that edge to help give the impression that it's under the water. So I'm making sure I'm going over the edge of it like that, and then just like that. And that'll just help, again, give the suggestion that it's under the water. Maybe I'll overlap these two. Like that. And that's the same thing, and the same, hopefully you're seeing the kind of same effect that I did on this
Yes.
one. I lifted those paint, right? So overlapping this guy.
That's a wonderful effect.
Oh, good.
Linda Dunn asked about what the cobalt or what the teal was that you used. Cobalt teal or
Yeah, Cobalt Teal by Core.
okay.
Yeah. All right. Okay, hopefully those little highlights
Wow.
are just helping to push those rocks into the water a little bit more. I'll let that
Yes.
fade out like that. All right, so and then and then I just usually put a couple little, give it a little, some birds or something back here.
Hmm.
You can't even see them on the screen. Maybe I can zoom in a little bit. Some areas. Okay, I think that's about it. Of course, I want to clean this up, clean up the trees a little bit, but I think I got through all the steps. I hope everybody enjoyed this. I really enjoyed sharing this with you. Let me go off the stop share so I can say goodbye to everybody. And again, check out my website and see if you're interested in any workshops. I got the workshop with the Northwest Watercolor Society. What's the date on that one?
May 1st and 2nd.
All right. So I hope I can see everybody there. Yeah. And I'll have a new Bob Ross shirt on and I'll show you my Bob Ross sock collection.
Ah,
And wonderful
yeah.
comments, many, many wonderful comments, and people are gonna watch the video again, and, yeah, so thank you for all of it.
Yeah,
Oh.
David, I'll send you the chat.
Okay, great. Yeah,
With
thanks.
that,
Thanks
I'll
for
send
having me. I had a blast. I really enjoy sharing my passion for watercolor. So thanks for having me.
Well, I told everybody in the emails, you're a very entertaining artist, and you definitely are. You lived up to it. So anyway, thank you so much. And everybody, his workshop is posted. You can sign up for it anytime now, and it would be May 1st and 2nd. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Thank you, David. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you,
I'm gonna
everybody.
I'm going to share my screen one more time because we really, really, really could not do this, everybody, without our sponsors. And like Debbie talked about at the beginning of the meeting, we have 4 Platinum Plus sponsors now, which is incredible. I mean, we're so lucky. And look at everybody else. Everybody else. We have the awards for our Waterworks exhibition coming up. Have almost doubled what we normally get. So we're so fortunate, and we're really, really happy about that. And I want to mention to you that the artists who were accepted into the Waterworks show, that list will be posted online on March 14th. We still have a lot of work to do with the list and the assigning of awards and things like that. But on March 14th, look on our website. We'll be sending out the acceptance packets the same day. Okay. So thank you, everyone. I really, really apologize for the fact that I forgot to start recording right at the beginning, but the important part with David is there. And I believe I managed to get John Cogley in there talking about gouache as well. So I think you'll be very pleased with the recording, even though I forgot the beginning. Anyway.
That's okay, Molly, it's good. It's
Okay. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next month. Hold on, I stopped sharing too soon. There's something else I want to share.
And I'd
Hold
like
on.
to say one more thing, Molly.
Sure, of
I
course.
want to tell everyone that even though what I said earlier about getting logged in on the website wasn't recorded, if you all go to the website now for the next few days, maybe a couple of weeks, those instructions will be popping up right in front of you. So if you'll just follow those, it'll get you where you need to go. And then you should be good to go. So
Yeah, it
Yeah,
tells you exactly what to do, which was brilliant to put that up there, Debbie.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
okay.
Okay, so March 28th, a month from tonight, we have Jed Dorsey, who I don't know if you guys have ever watched Jed Dorsey online, but he's just a pretty amazing acrylic painter. And he's very entertaining, and he's very, very adept at Zoom demonstrations and things like that. He even has his own sort of Jed Dorsey Watercolor Academy. So check him out. His workshop is April 26th and 27th. And he is also part of the Waterworks exhibition program that we have going on. So that is coming up on March 28th, next general meeting. All right, everybody. Thank you. I hope you had a good time. We did. And we'll see you next month. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Molly.
Bye.
all.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.